Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Ages of Chaos. Shifting on over once again to the fantasy setting for this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Age of Sigmar 3rd edition 3.0 Slaves to Darkness book. I was very, very, very lucky to get my hands on that limited edition boxed set that came with the wonderful new Chosen and that Demon Prince model. I tell you what, my loves, the new Demon Prince, don't take the pictures of the miniature that Games Workshop have put out as a measure of its quality, because for some reason they've kind of bished with it. I don't know whether it's the colour schemes they've used or the way it's photographed, but the way it's been painted for the official pictures does not do it justice. That miniature, the new Demon Prince, is spectacular. It is absolutely spectacular. One of the most beautiful renditions of a Demon Prince in these settings that has ever been. But for some reason, the paint scheme and the angles from which they photographed it do not make it look that great for some reason. I don't know why, but I've found that a lot of the paint schemes that people have used, just generally like fans have used, if you look for pictures of it online or in army blogs or whatever, are so much better. So much better. But I was also very, very lucky to get, with that boxed set, the beautiful new limited edition of the Slaves to Darkness book, the 3.0 book. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm sure that it said in the Warhammer community article about the special edition that it was a soft cover, and it's not. It's a soft, sort of like it's a hardback book, but it's got a sort of like velvety covering to it. It's really beautiful, really lovely product with like gold-edged pages and whatnot. The Slaves to Darkness have always been a bit of an odd one in Age of Sigmar. They've always been one of those armies which has been a holdover from the fantasy battle setting. They're a kind of get-you-by army that traditionally has been comprised of all of the stuff from old fantasy battle chaos armies that doesn't fit in any of the other books, so that doesn't fit in the god-specific books. That, you know, it's not really part of the Blades of Khorne, it's not really part of the Disciples of Tzeentch, it's not really part of the Maggotkin of Nurgle, it's not really part of the Hedonites of Slaanesh. It's all the traditional stuff like your Chaos Marauders, your classic Chaos Warriors, your Chosen, those kinds of things. They've always had like their own bespoke little army in the Age of Sigmar setting, but they've never really fulfilled their potential, which is kind of sad, because what the Slaves to Darkness represent is, for those Chaos fans who want an old-fashioned Chaos army, as they've kind of always been in the fantasy battle setting, this is your army. This is your army where it's your Chaos Horde, it's your Marauders, it's your Chaos Warriors. It is your classic fantasy Chaos army, as they've been since like the olden days, since the days of the original Realms of Chaos books and the first editions of Warhammer itself. For my part, I really like the way Chaos has gone in Age of Sigmar. I really like the divergent armies. I mean, my personal favourites are the Hedonites of Slaanesh and the Disciples of Tzeentch. I just love what's been done with them, and the Chaos-specific books in general are wonderful. But I'm really pleased that it's not a case of either or. There are options here. So if someone wants a more, classic Chaos army, they can have it. It's here. You've got the book. Now, as I said, they've always been given a little bit of short shrift traditionally, barring certain builds and certain entries. They've always been given a little bit of short shrift because they are not, there's no real new miniatures range for them. They are a classic army, so you can use all your stuff from the fantasy battle setting. But it seems like for 3.0, as they've done for pretty much every single army that's been re-released for the new edition, they've gone nuts. They've really put a lot of time and effort and consideration into this book, and they've thought about what the slaves to darkness really represent in the mortal realms in Age of Sigmar. What they've really gone for here is the notion that the tribes and the peoples and the various forms of civilization, and yes, there are civilizations dedicated to chaos in this book, what they represent are not only those that traditionally worshipped the chaos powers in one form or aspect or shape or whatever, they also represent those peoples who were left outside of Azir when Sigmar closed the gates against the encroaching forces of chaos and left so many people out there to the tender mercies of the forces of chaos. They are the aggrieved descendants of those peoples who have made of Sigmar and his forces, the gods of order. They have basically become the devils and the demons and the antagonistic mythical figures of their traditions, whereas the chaos powers that readily took them to their breast, who readily accepted them, for, however dark they might be, however dark that acceptance might be, they actually took them and accepted their worship and gave them the means to survive and even prosper, whereas Sigmar didn't. So in the millennia that have followed, the God knows how many thousands of years that have followed since Sigmar closed the gates in the face of their ancestors, those tribes have come to mythologize the chaos powers in various different aspects, in various different forms, as their saviors, as the true powers of reality. Whereas Sigmar and the gods of order are variously mythologized as cowards and as betrayers. That's fascinating, isn't it? Because they're not entirely wrong. That did happen. Sigmar and the gods of order did close the gates of Azir in their faces. Okay, it may have been necessary to save some fragment of civilization, but that's the truth of the matter. Another thing that's been made overt in this book is that chaos worship is the norm in the mortal realm. So, and it's not just like tribal peoples either. There are entire cities and city-states and nations dedicated to the worship of the chaos powers, either as a whole or in one way, shape or form. There are numerous different aspects of the four great powers that are worshipped across the face of the mortal realms. Like, for example, in this book, it's made overt that Khorne and in fact all of the chaos powers have different forms and different aspects depending on where they are worshipped. So Khorne has one called the Brass Belladonna, for example, which is a female aspect of Khorne. Nurgle has one which is Mother Mort, which is a maternal figure. That's awesome. I love that. I mean, that's always been established within Slaanesh. Slaanesh has always had many different, as has Tzeentch. But it's great to see that being made overt, And the fact that the worship of Sigmar, like the followers of Sigmar, are kind of the invaders in these lands. Since the opening of the gates of Azir and the resultant Dawnbringer crusades and the spreading of the Stormcast hosts across reality, the peoples that were left behind and who have come to worship chaos now regard these as invasions into their lands and also as desecrations. I mean, it's a case of how dare they come back now and start telling us that we are unclean and we're filthy and we have to change, when they were the ones who abandoned our ancestors. How dare they? It's a really interesting take on chaos worship in the mortal realms, and it gives them a voice. It gives the various peoples and tribes of chaos a bit more of a voice. They're not just monsters, they're not just lunatics, they're not just like corrupted peoples. There is a reason behind their worship. There's also a bit more of dynamism occurring here, because now there is dispute amongst the followers of Chaos as to who the arch messiah of Chaos is. Before, of course, it was always Archaon. Archaon was the ever-chosen, the arch messiah of all Chaos, the ultimate chosen of the gods. But now that's not quite so certain, because Be'lakor has made the scene again. And there are now divisions in the forces of Chaos as to who is the genuine Everchosen, who is the true servant of the Chaos powers. And of course, Be'lakor is doing everything in his power to foment those divisions. There's even, and this is really cool, there is even one of the circles of the Varangard, the closest, most dedicated followers of Archaon, who are secretly dedicated to Be'lakor now. And that is kind of cool, isn't it? That is kind of wonderful. Be'lakor is a really dynamic element of this book, and his servants are everywhere. There are different cults dedicated to Be'lakor. There's that Varangard circle that's dedicated to Be'lakor, and there's even a really wonderful little army list in here that's basically dedicated to Be'lakor, so you can include lots of different things from lots of different Chaos powers and make this very classic polyglot force that's under the auspices of Be'lakor himself. It's really wonderful stuff. One of the things I love about this book, as I mentioned earlier, is they've not only thought about where the slaves to darkness sit in terms of the background, like where are they at the moment in the present status of the mortal realms. What are they doing? What is their relationship to the Dawnbringer Crusades? What is their relationship to the almost release of Slaanesh, to the other Chaos forces that are at work in the mortal realms? But also the army list. The army list is wonderful. Every single one of the data of the battle scrolls in this book has been given more consideration than it ever has before, and they've been balanced out. They've been considered in terms of what they do. One of the most wonderful things in this book is all of the little war bands from Warcry, all of those cultist representations of the different cultures of Chaos that have occurred in Warcry are now entries in this book. You can make some really fascinating, tailored and narrative forces using these little cultist units. That the way they tend to work is they're fragile because they're just mortals, they're just humans, but they emphasize very particular aspects of the Chaos powers through their particular religious beliefs. So they all have a very peculiar function within the army. They fill tactical gaps, and they are all interesting. They're all really, really fascinating. Aesthetically, they're interesting, and you can do so much with them. I love that to bits. You've got the Chaos Legionnaires, which are a throwback. They are a real throwback to the artwork and some of the entries in the Realms of Chaos. They are like very, very, very old school Chaos miniatures and Chaos mortal forces from the Realms of Chaos books, and they worship Be'lakor. They're servants of Be'lakor. You've got the Horns of Hashut, which my colleague Adam from the Fluffenhammer. These are the guys for you, Adam, because you've got your Hashut based army. They are again servants of Be'lakor, but in his taken aspect as Hashut, the old Chaos dwarf god. You've got the Cypher Lords, who are one of my favourites, and they worship Chaos in a very different way to most of the others. They look like, and they give off the feeling of being much more civilized. It's much more subtle, the way they manifest Chaos worship. And in terms of what they do, they are one of these really fast-moving, really acrobatic units that is kind of like a disruption unit. They can do lots of things that causes enemy units to lose powers or to lose aura abilities. It's really, really cool. That's the kind of thing. Then you've got balanced against them, you've got your heavy units. So you've got your classic Chaos Warriors, who are amazing in this book. You've got your Chaos Knights. You've got your Chaos Chosen, who have got, not only have they got lovely new miniatures, but they actually do something now. Unlike in the last book, where they were a bit of a throwaway unit, to be honest. Now they're kind of the equivalent of Chaos Terminators from 40k. They're the big, hard-hitting elite unit, a bit like the Varangard are, you know? It's really quite wonderful. Every single unit in this book has been given... It's been given all due diligence. It's been given thought as to why you would want to include it in your Chaos Force. And I really love that. I also love the fact that there are rules in this book for including units from this book in one of the other Chaos Forces and vice versa. So if you wanted to do a wider Slaanesh force that included elements from the Hedonites but also had elements from this book, you can do it. You can do it without sort of undermining the integrity of the army as a whole, and that's really, really wonderful. Archaon has been balanced out a little bit, is no longer quite like there were certain synergies in the last book that made him rather abusable. He's still a beast, don't get me wrong. He's, in terms of his base data sheet, he's actually had a bit of an upgrade. He's got more wounds than he ever did before. He's got better armor saves and whatnot than he ever did before. But he's still a beast. But he's just balanced out a little bit more. Baelacor is an absolute monster in this book. He can't quite take on Archaon one-on-one as such, but he's got some special rules that are just insane. He's got one, the Dark Master. He can only do it once per battle. But when he uses it, he can effectively neuter an enemy unit for a round. He can make it so that that enemy unit can do nothing for an entire round, and that is really good. It's a really amazing ability. Demon Princes have had a massive glow up to fit in with their new miniature. They are now much, much, much better than they ever were, and by using certain combinations of army-wide special rules and whatnot, you can make them wizards now, which is wonderful. I never understood why they took that away from them in the fantasy battle setting. Demon Princes should be wizards, unless they're Demon Princes of Khorne, in which instance they should have a different special rule that makes them better in melee, right? But for some reason they took that away from them in the fantasy battle setting. It's never made any sense, especially for Demon Princes of Tzeentch, right? It doesn't make any sense for them not to be wizards, but now you can make them into wizards, which is grand. You just take them as part of a Kabbalist's army, and lo and behold, they're wizards, which is great. In fact, Kabbalist armies, if I was going to do an army from this book, I would do a Kabbalist's army, because Kabbalists are now amazing. A Kabbalist army makes every hero in your army into a wizard, which is a bit bonkers, to be honest. It makes it like a mini Disciples of Tzeentch army. That is very, very, very cool indeed. They play, the way these guys play is very like how classic fantasy battle chaos armies play. They're not very good at long range as such. They've got a few sort of mid to long range units, but you want them to close. What you want is the battering ram. You want them hitting the enemy lines and just tearing them apart. And in that, there isn't much that can match them. But at long range, they're going to suffer, these guys. They don't have much in the way of long range. But you can do stuff with them to make them more mobile, which is kind of what you want, really. It's a very good it's a good book. It's a really good book. One of the nice new additions is Ensorcelled Banners, which again is kind of a throwback to the old days when you could give units magic banners based on what Mark of Chaos they have, or you can just give them like universal ones. That's very, very cool indeed. The Marks of Chaos have been upgraded massively. So back in the previous book, the way they did it was a bit, it didn't really work very well. So in the previous book, the Marks of Chaos gave units a keyword and also gave them certain special rules if they were within range of a hero from the army with the same Mark of Chaos, which doesn't really make sense. Why would they have to be in range of a hero? Here, the way they've got around that is the Mark of Chaos gives the unit to which it's applied a special rule, and then the hero with the mark gets the special rule and also a special command that they can give, which makes enormous sense, of course. And they're all useful. Every single one has particular uses without being overpowered, and that is really, really cool. It makes a lot of sense. The Eye of the Gods table has been refined massively and works really well now. Almost everything has use in the Eye of Gods table. It's a good little book. It's a really, really wonderful little book. There are some nice new additions, nice new characters in here. Baelacor has got a follower named Eternus, Blade of the First Prince, who is a Varangard champion who reneged on his oaths to Archaon and was reborn by Baelacor's lack of grace into an undying condition. He actually can't die. He's a corrupted, almost like a corrupted Stormcast in a way. The way it describes Baelacor rebirthing him is amazing. He basically grabs him, carries him up into the storm of swirling souls, where you know how the Stormcast can't go back to Azir anymore because of the pall that Baelacor cast across the realms. Now their souls are swirling in this sort of screaming limbo above the realms, and Baelacor carried him up into that and magically funneled all of those tormented souls into his body. So now Eternus cannot die. Whenever he does, he's just reborn in this corrupted Stormcast lightning. It's brilliant. It's really, really wonderful. Interesting character, especially if Baelacor is on the battlefield. It's a very exciting book. It really is. And of course there's loads of new miniatures to go with it. They've almost done more or less the entirety of the range, apart from the Chaos Marauders. They're still using that really old kit from, oh my god, so long ago. Really, really long time ago. I can sort of see the Marauders going the way of the Dodo as more and more of the war bands from Warcry become part of this army, because you kind of don't need them anymore, if I'm perfectly honest. There's no reason why you'd take them above and beyond one of the cult units. There really, really isn't. So, yeah. Do they have the... They do... I mean, there is one reason. They do have the Mark of Chaos, which means they do benefit from certain special rules. They are interesting, but they could definitely do with a new miniature. Quite a few new miniatures, actually, to be perfectly honest. But yes, it's a very exciting book. And again, another hit for Age of Sigmar 3.0. Every book that's been released in this edition thus far, and I mean every battle tome, has been great. Even those that you wouldn't necessarily expect, where the miniatures range hasn't been upgraded to any meaningful degree. It's very impressive. They clearly wanted the Slaves to Darkness to have some presence this time round, and boy howdy do they. It's a really, really good book. A great read, a really good read. Lots of new stuff going on in here. Lots of slightly rejigged stuff that makes the old dynamics a bit more interesting. It's impressive, and it's what more of this, please, Games Workshop, you know? I cannot wait. I cannot wait for the Hedonites book, because that's the one that's going to be very, very exciting for me.